I'm 68 years old. Last week, I did something I hadn't done in 35 years. I went to my ex-husband's funeral. His name was David, and speaker after speaker at the service kept saying the same thing. He was such a good, reliable man. And they were right. He was. He was kind. He was stable. He was the safest harbor I have ever known. And I divorced that good man. I left him for a man who was exciting and passionate and who ultimately destroyed my life. I'm telling you this today, not because I want your pity. I'm telling you this because I made a mistake that I see smart, wonderful young women making every single day. And it's a mistake that will cost you everything. To understand my mistake, you have to understand the girl I was at 20. I wasn't like the other girls in my nursing program who dreamed of a white picket fence. I grew up on old black and white movies. I wanted grand romance. I wanted a love that felt like a storm, something that swept you off your feet. I didn't want comfort. I wanted passion, a dangerous, all-consuming fire. I had no idea that you can't live in a fire. You can only burn in it. Then I met David. I met him not at a loud party, but in the quiet of the university library. I was stressed, cramming for a pharmacology exam, and I dropped a huge stack of flashcards. They scattered everywhere. I was on the verge of tears. And this young man with kind eyes and a serious face simply got down on his hands and knees and started picking them up, putting them back in order. He was an accounting student. His name was David. Our first date wasn't dinner and a movie. He found out I had to work a double shift at the hospital and simply showed up in the middle of the night during my 15-minute break with a thermos of hot soup and a sandwich. He didn't say much. He just sat with me while I ate, making sure I wasn't alone. That was David. He wasn't a man of words. He was a man of quiet actions. He wasn't exciting, not in the way the movies showed. He didn't write me poetry. His idea of a wild night was buying a new complicated board game and spending a Saturday figuring out the rules together. He remembered that I liked my coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of milk. He learned how to give the best foot rubs after my 12-hour shifts. When my father had his first heart attack, David was the one who drove me to the hospital at 3 a.m. He was the one who sat with me in the cold, sterile waiting room for 6 straight hours, who held my hand, and who just said nothing, which was the most perfect thing he could have done. So I did what a smart girl is supposed to do. I married the good man. We bought a small, sensible house in a quiet neighborhood. We had our daughter, Sarah. Our life fell into a rhythm, a good rhythm, a quiet rhythm, a predictable rhythm. Work, dinner, watching TV, weekend trips to the park. Years started to blur into one another. My life was a calm, peaceful, sunlit lake. And I, like a fool, was dying for a hurricane. The hurricane's name was Mark. He was a new cardiac surgeon at the hospital. He was everything David wasn't. Charismatic, arrogant, funny, dangerously handsome. When he walked into a room, the air crackled. He had this way of looking at you, really looking, that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He made me feel seen, not as a wife or a mother or a nurse, but as a woman. It started how it always starts. Innocent flirting in the hospital cafeteria, sharing a dark joke after a difficult case. He started seeking me out. He'd ask for my opinion on things, not medical things, but life things. He found out I loved old movies. He started quoting them to me. He listened to me complain about my boring life, and he didn't try to fix it. He just nodded and said, A woman like you wasn't made for a quiet life. You were made for an adventure. He was pouring gasoline on a fire I didn't even know was burning. He made my stable life with David feel like a cage. A comfortable, safe, well-appointed cage, but a cage nonetheless. David's quiet kindnesses started to feel like smothering. His reliability felt like a routine. The peaceful lake of my life suddenly felt like a stagnant pond, and Mark was the promise of a raging ocean. After 6 months of this emotional affair, I did the unthinkable. I told David I wanted a divorce. I'll never forget that night. He came home from work, and I was waiting for him in the living room. I'd rehearsed the speech in my head 100 times. I told him I wasn't happy, that I felt trapped, that I needed more. He didn't fight. He didn't yell. That was the worst part. He just sat down in his favorite armchair, the one I always complained was old and ugly, and he just looked at me. His face wasn't angry. It was just shattered. After a long silence, he said, his voice hoarse, "I don't know how to compete with a feeling. I just know how to love you. I just know how to be here every day. I'm sorry that's not enough." It would have been 1,000 times easier if he just hated me. I married Mark 6 months after the divorce was final, and the first 2 years were a whirlwind, a fever dream. We took a last-minute trip to Paris. We bought a flashy sports car. We went to loud, exciting parties where important people laughed at his jokes. It was everything I thought I wanted. It was fireworks every single night. But you can't live in a state of constant explosion. Fireworks, by their nature, burn out, and what's left is just smoke, ashes, and the smell of sulfur. The passion I craved was just Mark's deep-seated selfishness. His impulsiveness was a profound inability to be reliable. The same charisma he used to win me over, he used on every other nurse, every secretary, every woman who gave him a moment of attention. The adventure turned into anxiety. The grand gestures stopped. He forgot our anniversary because he was swamped at work, but I later found out he'd taken another woman out to dinner. When our daughter, Sarah, got a bad case of pneumonia, he was unreachable for 2 days on a golf trip. The man who was supposed to make me feel alive just made me feel constantly, gut-wrenchingly anxious and foolish. The end was as dramatic as the beginning. A massive fight, screaming broken plates, an ugly, bitter divorce that dragged on for 2 years and left me with a mountain of debt from his reckless spending. He left my life as quickly as he entered it, a hurricane moving on to its next town, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. I spent the next 25 years alone. I poured everything I had into my daughter and my career. I never dated again. How could I? My heart's compass was broken. I had proven to myself that I was a fundamentally terrible judge of character. I had a man made of solid gold, and I'd traded him for a piece of shiny, worthless tin. I didn't trust myself to ever choose again. David, meanwhile, did what good men do. He rebuilt. He remarried a few years after our divorce. A quiet woman, a local librarian. I would see them sometimes at the grocery store or the town fair, and the sight always twisted a knife in my gut. They weren't all over each other. They didn't have that desperate performative passion I once craved. They just were together. They moved with the quiet, effortless rhythm of a couple who had found their home in each other. He looked peaceful. He looked happy. Then, last week, My daughter called me, her voice thick with tears. "Dad's gone," she said. A sudden, massive heart attack. He was gone. I didn't want to go to the funeral. What right did I have to be there, to mourn the man whose heart I had broken first? But Sarah, my daughter, who always adored her father no matter what, asked me to go with her. So I went. I stood in the back of the crowded church, a ghost in the ruins of a life I had demolished. I listened as person after person got up to speak about him, not about his job in accounting. They told stories. One man talked about how David coached the local kids' baseball team for 20 straight years, never missing a game. An elderly woman tearfully recalled how, for the last 5 years of her husband's life, David would come over every Sunday morning just to sit with him and watch the game so she could have a few hours to herself. His own son talked about how his dad wasn't a man of big speeches, but he was the man who taught him how to be a good father by just being there, always. Finally, his wife, the librarian, got up to speak. She was a small, plain woman, the kind of woman I would have dismissed as boring all those years ago. She didn't cry, she just smiled, this soft, gentle, luminous smile. And she said, "David wasn't a man of grand gestures. He never brought me a dozen roses, but he brought me a single cup of coffee in bed every morning for 32 years. He believed that love wasn't a feeling you fell into. It was a house you built, brick by brick, day by day. He was a master builder." And in that moment, standing in the back of that church, the full weight of my life's catastrophic mistake crashed down on me. The boring life I had run away from, it wasn't boring. It was a fortress built of 1,000 small kindnesses, of unwavering reliability, of a love that was an action, not just a feeling. And I didn't just leave it. I took a wrecking ball to it, all for the cheap thrill of a few fireworks. I threw away a diamond because I was temporarily blinded by a firecracker. I chose a man who made me feel alive for a moment, over a man who would have spent a lifetime making sure I was okay. Please, if you're young and you're with a good man who feels boring, I beg you, look closer. Ask yourself this: is he boring, or is he just at peace? Is your life boring, or is it just safe from the drama and chaos that fleeting passion always brings? Don't destroy a good solid house in search of a perfect castle in the clouds that doesn't exist. Because fireworks are beautiful. They light up the whole sky, but they last only for a moment, and a steady flame, the one that keeps you warm through the long, cold, lonely nights. That is the only thing that truly matters in the end.